So tonight's June chapter meeting, we have a guest speaker, and I'm going to let Mary Lou, one of our leadership team members, go ahead and introduce Mara.
Okay, well, I'll give the brief bio because Mara, you've done so much. Anyway, so I am delighted to introduce Mara Shulman. She's a senior attorney for Conservation Law Foundation project, the Zero Waste Project. And in this role, she is advancing the zero waste advocacy, litigation, and legislative work, in Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. Yikes. Thank you for joining us, Mara. Thanks for presenting.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to be here. So as Mary Lou said, I work for the Zero Waste Project, which is a project of Conservation Law Foundation's Environmental Justice Program. And I am relatively new to CLF. I joined the organization in January of this year. And I've been really busy in Connecticut and Rhode Island because their legislative sessions start earlier than Massachusetts, but Massachusetts is just ramping up right now. And so I'm here today to talk about some of the legislative priorities that our Zero Waste Project has in Massachusetts and invite you to become involved in that process. I think it's really fantastic when the legislators hear in mass from their constituents, from people who are doing hard work around the state. You mentioned earlier that you are planning a litter cleanup, and we need to pass laws that get to the root of the problem that leads to that litter so that you don't have to spend all of your free time picking up plastic from the sides of the road, from your waterways. And so some of the pieces of legislation that I want to talk to you about today are aimed at doing that.
I agree with the laws. I totally agree. Just like I see on the road that like there's a certain amount of money that you'll have to pay if you litter. There's like a Massachusetts law that will give anyone who litters a fine.
Yeah, there are lots of laws that are aimed at trying to prevent litter, and I'd like to talk about some that would get rid of some of the materials that we commonly find littered in our communities and in our water. So I have a slideshow. I'm going to share my slides, and there's not that many, about 6 or 7 slides, I believe. And then when I'm done, I'd love to just chat with you all. We can ask questions and we can talk about strategy. So let's see if that worked. Can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. I'm just gonna see if I can make it larger. How's that? Is that full screen?
Looks great.
Great. Okay. So Zero Waste Project presentation for your Climate Reality Southcoast group. My name is Mara Shulman, as I said. I'll talk just briefly about the Zero Waste Project at CLF. The organization has a number of different programs, and environmental justice is one of the programs. The Zero Waste Project is one of 4 projects within the environmental justice program. In the Zero Waste Project, we strive to protect New England communities from the dangers posed by unsustainable waste management practices such as landfills and incinerators. And there's a new, or it's not new, but there's a kind of technology that is being advanced as another way to manage our waste that is generally called advanced recycling. That's kind of the umbrella term. So we'll talk about that a little bit too. We also recognize that environmental justice communities host a disproportionate share of toxic waste management facilities, and therefore the health outcomes for people living in those communities are oftentimes more impacted. We fight the siting and expansion of these facilities in environmental justice communities while also advocating for zero waste solutions at the same time. So that's a bit of a summary of the Zero Waste Project. So zero waste solutions, what are they? There's a bunch of different graphics I'm sure you've seen that depict the zero waste hierarchy. This is just one that the Connecticut Sierra Club that I partner with created as a graphic for a recent coalition event that we had, and I liked it, so I'm going to use it here. At the top of the hierarchy, we have waste prevention. That is the absolutely best way to manage waste, is to prevent it from occurring in the first place. So we can rethink and redesign our products so that they don't create waste. We can reduce the amount of waste we produce. And then when we do have items that we've used, we can reuse them, thereby preventing us from having to purchase a new item. So that's the first tier. And I know that all of you are very familiar with this work, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating things that you know even better than I. The next tier of the zero waste hierarchy is sustainable waste management. So for example, the things that the Zero Waste Project does is we advocate for food scrap bans to prevent all food scraps from entering the waste stream, and we advocate for the composting of food scraps. Material recovery, residuals management, and recycling are other examples of sustainably managing our waste. But again, we always want to prevent waste from occurring in the first place if we can. And then finally, at the bottom tier, we have unsustainable waste management. And I talked about those earlier, like incinerators or landfills or advanced recycling facilities. To the extent possible, we want to prevent any reliance on those unsustainable waste management practices. So what does our advocacy look like at the Zero Waste Project? We support legislation that promotes zero waste solutions, and we oppose legislation that promotes unsustainable waste management. So those are the two things that I'm going to be mostly talking to you today about, different kinds of legislation that have been introduced this session in Massachusetts. We also work in coalition with other organizations. So I'm part of a loose coalition of Massachusetts organizations. We're calling ourselves Mass is Not Disposable this legislative session as a way to prioritize these pieces of legislation. And I want to say the final bullet point here, which I won't go into too much detail about today, but we look for opportunities to provide community lawyering and other advocacy. And I heard you mention earlier that you were in New Bedford for an event, and that is a community that I'm currently partnering with in the community lawyering model. I represent the Southcoast Neighbors United group in their opposition to expansion of a waste management facility in New Bedford. So I have two pieces of legislation that I'm going to highlight here, but then there's two others that aren't on the slides that I'm definitely love to talk to you about. The bottle and can deposit system is the first one. Our bottle bill, as it's known in Massachusetts, is very, very outdated. It was passed into law in 1984 and has not been updated since, except for 1 year when Governor Romney removed the Clean Environment Fund designation. Previously, all unclaimed deposits from bottles and cans had gone to a special fund, and he removed that fund. So at this point in time, any unclaimed deposits just go into the general fund in Massachusetts. So that's the only change that has occurred to the bottle bill in the last 40 years. Now, as a result, our bottle bill is incredibly outdated. When it was passed into law, the deposit was 5 cents, and 5 cents in 1984 was worth a lot more than it is now. So we need to update our deposit so that it's high enough to incentivize people to return their bottles and cans for recycling. So the bill that's been introduced this session would do that. The next slide talks about a number of other things that the updated bottle bill would do. So it would increase the deposit to 10 cents. It would include all glass, plastic, and aluminum beverage containers as small as nips and as large as 3 liters. And that is, when I was talking about ways to prevent litter earlier, this is one of the key ways to prevent litter, because we find that in states that have more robust bottle bills with high enough deposits and a broader array of beverage containers included, that the litter of beverage containers decreases significantly. Reloop actually has statistics, and I'm happy to share them with you. I don't have them off the top of my head, but I can share the fact sheet that Reloop has put together, showing you exactly how much, what percentage of litter is reduced when bottle bills are updated and more robust. Another component of the bill that's been introduced in Massachusetts is that it would permit redemption from retail or redemption center. And this is really important because for some people who don't live near redemption centers, they aren't actually able to return their beverage containers for redemption if they don't have access, if they don't have access to transportation that would allow them to get to a beverage redemption center. So having this kind of universal return is really key to making a beverage container deposit law equitable. And then finally, we create that clean environment fund again and designate any unclaimed deposits to that fund. So if I buy a bottle of iced tea, for example, which is not currently included, iced tea is not currently included under the bottle deposit bill, but it would be under the new bill. And I pay a 10-cent deposit on it, and then I don't return my iced tea bottle to a redemption center or the retailer and reclaim my deposit. What happens to that 10 cents? Well, right now it just goes to the general budget, but under the new law, it would be designated to the Clean Environment Fund, and then it would be earmarked specifically for recycling infrastructure and for other kinds of sustainability measures. So that's one bill that we are really prioritizing this year before the Massachusetts legislature. Another bill that to me feels like a no-brainer, like we have to pass this year, is a plastic bag ban at checkout, because actually in Massachusetts, over 150 cities and towns have already passed ordinances that would restrict plastic bags at checkout. And so obviously there is an appetite in our state for this. And we see that large retailers like Big Y, Stop and Shop, they have Stop and Shop effective July will stop distributing plastic bags at checkout at any of its stores. So the appetite amongst retailers also exists. So if the consumers and the retailers are in agreement that we should stop distributing plastic bags at checkout, then there's no reason for our lawmakers not to pass a bill that eliminates the use of single-use plastic bags at checkout across the entire state.
Just to
yes.
add to it, just so you know, I work at Walgreens, and since I've worked at Walgreens my time, like in the past year, I've noticed that there's no like plastic bags. It's all like paper bags, which I think is like great. Like there's a law in Lexington that most like merchants who, utilize like bags are supposed to utilize paper bags. They're not allowed to utilize plastic bags for customers.
Yeah,
It's a local law.
Lexington must be one of those 150 plus cities and towns in Massachusetts that have already passed that ordinance, which is fantastic. So they're leading the way for the rest of the state. And the bill that's been introduced would prohibit retail establishments from providing customers with single-use plastic bags. One thing that's really important is that it would permit the sale of recycled paper bags. So you said at Walgreens, for example, Ari, that they're giving out paper bags instead of plastic, which is more ecological because paper is biodegradable while plastic is not. However, we also would generally prefer people to bring reusable bags over getting a bag at checkout. And so by putting a fee on the paper bag, it does incentivize people to use to bring their returnable bags. But if they do need a paper bag, they can obtain one for a fee, and then a portion of that fee is returned to the municipality where the fee was originated to be used for programs like litter prevention, recycling, composting, other kinds of sustainability programs.
I agree with you, Mara.
Yeah, it'd be really great. It really would be great. And I feel like this is kind of non-negotiable. We have to pass this bill, if anything, this session. One other thing, oh, sorry, that's my last slide, but one other thing I wanted to share about the plastic bag ban is that the law does a really good job of defining what a reusable bag is, because what we've seen in some cities and towns is that retailers have just replaced those thin film plastic bags with thicker film plastic bags. That happens where I live. I've seen CVS handing out these thick film plastic bags because they say, well, they're reusable. They don't tear. You can use them multiple times. But that's not acceptable. We want to get rid of plastic bags entirely. So the bill does
even biodegradable plastic you're talking about?
Well, biodegradable would not be considered reusable. So the bill does a really good job of defining what a reusable bag is by saying that the handles need to be stitched, not heat fused. that the fabric has to be woven. It doesn't mean that it won't contain some kind of plastic material. I mean, polyester is made from plastic, so it's very possible the woven material is comprised of plastic, but that it's also washable. So those thick film plastic bags will no longer be permissible at checkout under this law. And then there were two other bills that I don't have on my slides because they don't deal as explicitly with litter, which I understood when talking to Mary Lou was one of the main issues that this group addresses. But I did want to talk about them in case you're interested, so I'll just highlight them really briefly. Two other bills that are priorities for the coalition I'm in. One is an Extended Producer Responsibility for Packaging Act. You might hear that referred to as EPR. What that means is, I mean, we all know that when we buy something, it's wrapped in incredible amounts of packaging, more and more, it seems, each year. And what the EPR bill does is it requires the producers of packaging to reduce the amount of packaging that they use, to increase the recyclability of the packaging they use, and to move towards eliminating the toxics that are contained in their packaging. So they don't have any market incentive right now to do any of that. So we need to create that incentive through law by shifting the responsibility for dealing with all the toxicity and waste from our packaging back onto the producers of it. Yeah.
I'm really excited about the EPR bill. And I know Maine already has one. Is this one more robust than the Maine EPR bill or the California EPR bill? Do you know much about the differences?
I'm not as much an expert in them, so I can't tell you word for word how they compare, but I can tell you what the best practices are for EPR bills, and I can share with you some fact sheets on the EPR bill that's been proposed in Massachusetts. And it is the strongest EPR bill that you can have because what's really important in an EPR bill is that there are firm targets that have to be met for all the things I mentioned around reduction of packaging, recyclability of packaging, and toxicity in packaging. Because if there aren't firm targets, then the producers aren't required to meet those targets by specific years, then they have too much wiggle room to postpone what we know is necessary, this reduction of plastic packaging. So the EPR bill that's been introduced in Massachusetts was very much influenced by some research that Beyond Plastics did into what makes the most effective EPR bill. And so I can tell you with confidence that the EPR bill that's been introduced here is the strongest that it could be. But I'm afraid I can't answer the question how it compares to California and Maine's in more specific ways.
That's super helpful though, because we trust Beyond Plastics, right, Mary Lou?
Totally. They're my go-to.
Yeah. I would love to hear more, if possible, about your work with the Parallel Products Project and the ways that you're supporting South Coast Neighbors United, because we're definitely allied with that group. And when you say advanced recycling and chemical recycling and how that is one of our last options, New Bedford has done a deal basically to expand that recycling facility in the community that is a marginalized community. So I'd love to hear more about that as well. But I know we also probably have more questions about these other bills as well.
I'd be really happy to talk to you about New Bedford and also Taunton, another community that I partner with. Before I do, let me just tell you quickly about the chemical recycling bill that's been introduced by Rep. Giannino, because that's the fourth of the 4 bills that we're prioritizing this session. And what that bill would do is it would prohibit the siting and construction of any so-called advanced recycling facility in Massachusetts. There aren't currently any here, but there are companies that are making inroads and attempting to construct these kinds of facilities. And advanced recycling is just an umbrella term that refers to, or chemical recycling is another umbrella term that's used to refer to a number of different kinds of technologies like pyrolysis and gasification. I can talk to you in in most detail about gasification, because that is actually one of the facilities that we're opposing in Massachusetts. So in New Bedford, actually, well, so let me pause for a second, because those are the 4 bills that I wanted to highlight for you. Are there any questions or comments or anything you want to discuss about those bills that I mentioned before I talk about the 2 communities? Yeah. Oh, I think you're on mute, Susan.
Always. The final bill, you mentioned the chemical recycling. Is that typical kind of NIMBY sort of reaction?
Well, I don't know exactly if I'm understanding your question.
I mean, you know, for the greater good kind of thing, but Massachusetts seems not necessarily wanting to buy into it from what I'm reading between sentences here.
Oh, no, I don't think that chemical recycling should be explored anywhere. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
But yes, that is a really good point to raise. Like, we want to make sure that when we are opposing toxic and unsustainable waste management, that we're not just opposing in our communities and turning, you know, a blind eye towards it being towards that kind of unsustainable waste management in other communities, because absolutely we need to protect the public health environment of everyone. So thank you for asking that.
You're welcome.
Chemical recycling, and it's a really broad umbrella term, so I don't want to I don't mean to glaze over the differences, but let me give the example of what's happening in Taunton, and then hopefully that will illustrate, you know, what this kind of facility might look like. So Taunton is a community in Massachusetts that is has been selected by Aries as a site for a biosolids gasification facility. And what that means is they would be using gasification, heating their feedstock to a very, very high temperature above 1200 degrees Fahrenheit in an oxygen, very low oxygen environment. And the feedstock that they plan to use is biosolids, or otherwise known as sewage sludge. And by doing so, this is what their proposal states, that they would be producing a gas that they would then use to power their facility, and they would be producing a ash, or what they call biochar, that that they would be selling for additive to concrete or to soil amendments. And why that is particularly problematic is that our sewage sludge is very, very contaminated with PFAS as a result of all the PFAS that are found in our water, and then landfill leachate, which is the juice that leaks out of landfills over time, is generally collected and dealt with in wastewater treatment facilities. That also contains the PFAS that have leaked out of the landfills. So what we're doing is they would be taking a very, very toxic material, processing at a very high heat. They claim to have technology that they say would destroy the PFAS, but presently they have not been able to demonstrate the data that proves that technology works. And so the community is very worried that they would be disseminating or dispersing PFAS through the exhaust. They would be any wastewater that they use, and they would be using, I think it's somewhere between 800 to 1,000 gallons of wastewater, producing 800 to 1,000 gallons of wastewater a day, would be returning to the municipal water treatment facility contaminated with additional PFAS. And then the ash, or biochar, would also be containing PFAS. And it's hard to imagine that there would be a market for that product, because as we know in Maine, for example, when they use sewage sludge as an additive to compost, what ended up happening is the land became contaminated, area water became contaminated, and you know, the direction in the future is going to be to ban the application of any kind of sewage sludge products, not to permit it. So it's very hard to imagine that there'll be a market for that biochar. And so the community is justifiably very skeptical of this proposal. Just imagine toxics in, it's really hard to imagine the toxins will also come out, and they have not been able to demonstrate that their technology that they purport will destroy PFAS actually works. So in that particular case, they did build another facility in Linden, New Jersey, that's pretty much equivalent. And the state of Massachusetts right now is reviewing the application by Aries for the facility in Taunton, and they have asked the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act office, the MEPA office, has asked Aries to produce the data from their Linden, New Jersey facility before they can proceed any farther along in the process in Massachusetts. And so far, they have not been able to provide that data from New Jersey. So that's why I say there's no evidence yet that it works, because we haven't seen that data. So that's the status of one particular case where gasification or advanced recycling facility is being proposed in Massachusetts. And you know, it's very risky business that shouldn't be happening anywhere. And if this bill were passed, it would prevent any facility like this from ever being built in Massachusetts. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. I hope I answered some of your questions, but I'm happy to answer more. Oh, Susan, you're on mute.
How are you spelling Aries?
ARIES.
Okay.
So New Bedford. Oh, yes, Mona.
I think you were starting to talk about New Bedford. My question simply was, is the facility in New Bedford using the same process that you've just described in Taunton?
No, originally New Bedford. Okay, so Parallel Products is the company in New Bedford that is proposing the facility. And originally there was 3 phases to the proposal, one of which would be biosolids processing, but they have removed that phase of their project. So at present, and one of the phases was a glass processing facility, which is already in operation. So the only thing that is outstanding right now is a solid waste transfer station. So their plan would take in 1,500 tons of municipal solid waste and construction and demolition debris daily, 6 days a week, from places throughout Massachusetts. It would process and bale that waste and then ship it out of state for incineration or landfilling elsewhere. And this brings me back to Susan's point, which is that our zero waste project does not want to ever resort to solutions that shift the responsibility of managing our waste to other communities, particularly communities where there aren't as robust environmental protection laws or environmental justice laws. And so when we ship our waste out of state, there's the very, very big risk that the state that would be receiving our waste doesn't have the same kinds of environmental justice laws that we do in Massachusetts, that we worked so hard to build, that allow us to protect the health and well-being of people who have historically been disproportionately burdened with pollution. And so the New Bedford facility we're opposing because it doesn't answer the true question. Like, remember the waste hierarchy. The first thing we have to do is reduce the amount of waste we produce. We can't just focus on the 3rd tier of the hierarchy, which is unsustainable waste management. So receiving 1,500 tons of waste a day, you know, they claim that they're going to sort it and remove 20 to 25% of the loose municipal solid waste for recycling. It's hard for me to imagine that that's possible, because in Massachusetts, we already have so many things that are banned from our waste. And we really need to look to Mass DEP to enforce those existing waste bans, like metal, textiles, food scraps over a certain amount, all recyclable material. That includes cardboard, paper, aluminum, glass, PET plastic. I mean, this is already banned from our waste stream. So we really need to focus on reduce the amount of waste we produce, enforcing our existing waste bans, and not relying on a transfer station to gather and ship our waste to some other community out of state. So that's why we're opposing the New Bedford facility, not because it would use chemical recycling, but just because it's an antiquated way of managing our waste that we've outgrown and we need to reject.
Yeah, and obviously the South Coast Neighbors United are also very opposed to having that many trucks coming in and out of that part of New Bedford, and the noise and the pollution of those trucks and all of that. I'd love to hear more about what we can do to help, or what's going on, what the next step is to get Mass DEP to enforce those waste bans, because a lot of people aren't even aware of them, like the textile ban or the fact that mattresses now absolutely can't be thrown out. Like, what is being done to help enforce those waste bans and help tighten them up?
Well, we do have a new commissioner of the DEP who just started. So we're hopeful, CLF and other organizations are really hopeful that she's going to enforce the existing waste bans with more vigor than the previous administration did. And we actually, our coalition has a meeting with her. Her name is Bonnie Heipel. We have a meeting with her this Wednesday. And we submitted a letter to her when she, congratulating her on her appointment several months ago, and asking for this meeting and asking her to take action on several of our priorities. I'm happy to share a copy of that letter with you if you'd like, but enforcing existing waste bans is one of our demands. And so that's what we're doing. If you're asking what you can do, I think it's very appropriate for you to reach out to her office as well and to make similar demands. And if you can share anecdotal evidence about why it's important to you and your community, I think that is really compelling. So I'll share a copy of that letter with you so you can see what we've already asked for. And you're very welcome to use it as a model if you'd like to follow up with similar demands. And I'm also going to share copies of fact sheets on all of the 4 bills that we discussed.
Yes, I guess at what point will there be action steps for these bills? I believe there's a hearing coming up for a couple of these bills very soon. And if you can share maybe with our viewers what we can do to support those bills, that would be great.
Yeah, those are very tangible action steps that you can start preparing for right now. So each of the bills I discussed will have a hearing before one of the committees at the State House. The EPR for packaging bill and the plastic bag ban bill. And I should add, there's some other plastics bills as well that we support. They're much broader. And so I do worry that that maybe the appetite won't be there within the legislature to take action on such a wide array of plastics. I certainly hope they do. And we support these bills, but there's 2 other, what we're calling sort of like omnibus plastics bills that would ban a much larger range of plastic items. So the fact sheet I have on the single-use plastic bag ban also includes the numbers for those omnibus plastic bills. So the EPR bill, the omnibus plastics bills, and the single-use plastic bag ban, all those bills will be heard by the Environment Committee on June 14th. I don't have the exact time or the information yet about how to submit your written testimony because they don't publish that until closer to the date. But I've been told by staffers for leadership on that committee that is the date they're going to hold the hearing on these plastics bills. So what you can do is, as a coalition or individually, you can prepare written testimony. And I'm happy to share a template if it's helpful to, to get started, that, describes the bills that you're supporting, talks about who you are. And I always encourage people to use evidence or anecdotes from your personal experience that demonstrates why you care and why you're sharing, why it's important for legislators to listen to you about this. So if you had data, Mary Lou's been sharing data with me from your cleanups. So if you had data from your cleanups, you could use that as an example of why, for example, we need to pass the plastic bag ban because this number of plastic bags were picked up during this particular beach cleanup, just as an example. And or how you may have worked within your community to pass a plastic bag ban and how successful it's been. That's another good anecdote that you could share that is really compelling. So you can prepare your written testimony either individually or as a coalition. And then once I have the information about how to submit it, I will share that. You will submit it you could submit a version online. And then you can also either sign up to testify in person or you can testify virtually. And usually you have 2 to 3 minutes to present oral testimony. So you could, if you've prepared a short piece of written testimony, you could read aloud your written testimony, or you could do something different. You could just talk about a particular highlight from your work and why this is so important to you that your legislators pass this bill. So that's the first thing you could do. Oh, yes, Susan.
Thank you. Who are the allies that we have up on the Hill?
Well, the Environment Committee is, one of the chairs of the Environment Committee is Senator Rebecca Rausch, and she is one of the sponsors of one of the really fantastic omnibus bills. So her bill would not only ban single-use plastic bags, but also a wide range of other single-use plastics like polystyrene for takeout food, plastic straws, plastic cutlery, and there's also a provision in there for the recycling of car seats, plastic car seats. So she is definitely an ally. She's a champion of that bill and other single-use plastics bills, and she's the chair of the committee. So I think we can't have a stronger ally than that. I have met with almost every member of the Environment Committee to talk about these priorities. So they have all received, my my mini version of my testimony already, and as well as the fact sheets that I'm going to share with you. And so they are, I hope knowledgeable, and they all do seem interested in taking action. But, the way the political process unfolds isn't always predictable. So what I can say is I think it's fantastic that the chair of the committee is an advocate. And the other chair of the committee is Representative Cahill. And when I met with him, he seemed very enthusiastic as well about taking action on some of these plastic spills. So I hope I'm not wrong to be as optimistic as I'm feeling right now.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mary Lou.
So I am testifying in person, and a person from Boston who's also going to testify in person didn't know if we needed to register in advance and how we register in advance to testify.
To testify in person.
Yeah.
So there is I'm just gonna, if you give me 1 second, I'm gonna look at these instructions for a hearing that's on Monday, not about one of these bills. So don't panic. It's about a PFAS bill. And I'm just assuming that it will have instructions that will be, okay, registration to present oral testimony, both virtually and in person, is required. To register, please fill out your contact information in this form. If providing testimony virtually, you will receive an invitation to the hearing with instructions via email. Okay, so when you register on this form, you will probably indicate whether you're doing it virtually or in person. And then if you're going in person, it'll probably give you a number that tells you where you are on the list of people testifying. But I have to say, I'm not totally confident because, as I mentioned, I am newer to CLF. So this is my first legislative season advocating at CLF in Massachusetts. So I am not as seasoned as some of the other advocates are with the legislative process. So I'm sorry, I don't know the exact answer to your question, but I will find out and I will definitely share that information with you.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think similar to, waiting on the written testimony link, it's the links for these things will be available a few days before the hearing. And so it's just about waiting for when those links come up.
Yeah, this one came up, this for the PFAS hearing, which is Monday, June 12th, came up today. So it's a week in advance. So I'm hoping that maybe on Wednesday or Thursday of this week, we'll have the notice for the plastics hearing next week. But I'll definitely share it with you as soon as I have information on that. And then, so the other bills, there's the bottle bill, which I think you're really, really well situated to testify on, because I'm sure if with the cleanups that you've done, you've encountered vast amounts of bottles. And Mary Lou sent me some pictures of some of the cleanups. So if you wanted to testify on that, I think that would be really important. That hearing hasn't been scheduled yet, but I heard a bit of a rumor that it may be on the 28th of June. So as soon as I have more information, I'll share that with you as well. That is in front of a different committee, not the Environment Committee. That's been assigned to the Telecommunications Telecommunications Utilities and Energy Committee, the TUE. And then that committee is also here taking testimony on the chemical recycling ban. And then separately, there's a standalone polystyrene ban, which I really don't understand the reason for this, but it's been assigned to the Public Health Committee. So once I find out when that hearing is, I will also share that information in case you're interested in testifying on that one as well. But the process will be the same for all the committees. You'll prepare written testimony, you'll submit it online, you'll register for whether you're going to testify in person or virtually, and then you can show up and give your testimony. Yeah.
It's my understanding that you can just provide written testimony too, right? Like you don't even have to, so you can just provide written testimony and not speak virtually.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like for example, if as a group, you wanted to submit a piece of testimony and have one of, somebody from your group present it orally, I think that'd be really powerful. And then individually, if you wanted to submit testimony on your own, but you didn't all want to testify, I think that might be a strategy. But you can talk amongst yourselves to figure out what the best strategy is for your group. But I do think that hearing from as many as people as possible is good. But I think hearing from coalitions and community groups like yours is really, really strong as well, because it demonstrates that people are doing this work on a day-to-day basis and they need the support of our elected officials. They can't rely on you to continue to safeguard the environment. We need laws that match your efforts. So that's how you can get involved in legislative advocacy. And I want to be a resource to you as much as you need. So I'm happy to provide templates. I'll send a template just in case it's helpful. I'll send the fact sheets. I'll send a copy of that letter to the DEP commissioner that I discussed. And then, anything else I can do, you just let me know.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments for Mara? Go ahead, Martin. You're muted.
I'm so sorry. I'm so usually good at getting rid of that mute button. So pardon me. Anyway, my name is Martin, and I'm with a group in Westport, along with Richard, who's on tonight, that does a cleanup. And I just have a question that might be a little bit different about the nip bottle situation. Do you guys feel? What's your opinion on the different communities that are banning them outright, or whether we should have a deposit on them?
I don't think it's either or. So our bottle bill needs to be updated regardless of whether nips are banned in a particular community or not, because when the bottle bill was passed in the 1980s, we didn't have all these different kinds of beverages that we have today. And so we need a bottle bill that includes every kind of beverage container that is on the market. And so that I want to see happen regardless of whether communities individually ban the sale of nips. When it comes to that, like I don't, there are some states that have talked about banning nips statewide, but I don't see that there's traction at the state level right now for that. So I don't anticipate that there would be any state law that would supersede any local ordinances. And so if local communities, for example, I recently read an article that that in a small municipality, a group of young people at the high school environment club had introduced an ordinance in their community to ban the sale of nips because they were really worried about littering. And they were also worried about the the occurrence of drunk driving, which is facilitated by easy access to alcohol in smaller beverage containers. They were not successful in passing that ordinance. And when I reached out to them to invite them to participate in this legislative advocacy at the state level, I was very clear with them that the beverage container, the bottle bill, beverage container deposit system, while addressing the question of litter and recycling of beverage containers, does not do anything to address the other concern around the occurrence of drunk driving. And so I don't think it's an either or, because the issues don't entirely overlap. But when it comes to litter in our community, when it comes to the cost of recycling and trash, which is skyrocketing for everyone across the state, and when it comes to trying to reduce our reliance on single-use plastics and move us towards a system where we refill beverage containers, because frankly, that is the way that we need to be going, is figuring out how to reuse beverage containers like we used to before we had the proliferation of plastic. That is what the bottle bill is aimed to address, but it does not address some of the other concerns in their communities that people have around the sale of nips.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. Besides these laws, what else do you think needs to happen to get us to the point where we're doing that rethink, redesign more, and where companies are focused on that?
It's such a daunting task, Laura. So I don't want to minimize it in any way. When we have to like totally remake the way we do business. And at times it just feels so daunting, but there are people who are doing it in different ways throughout in their communities. There's an organization called Don't Waste Durham. Yeah, I'm not sure if you've heard of, but they have created a system whereby every restaurant in their community uses reusable takeout containers. They're centrally collected, washed, and returned to the restaurants for reuse. And I've seen the woman who created that program speak on a couple of different panels. And it's just, every time I see it, I feel so inspired and so hopeful, because it's possible. It just takes a lot of creativity, and it takes the will. And in that case, the business community and community members came together to do it. There was no law that was involved in the creation of that program. So I think that things need to happen simultaneously. We need to be advocating for laws like extended producer responsibility that really take a bite out of our plastic packaging. We need to be advocating for deposit return systems that ensure that all our beverage containers are collected for recycling, and that we can build that infrastructure and that kind of behavioral mindset change that we need to transition to a refill beverage economy. So we need these bills, and we need these laws in place, but we also need people in our community and local businesses to get creative and invest in other strategies for doing business. One dream of mine, because we have such a large number of breweries in Massachusetts, it would be to see our breweries create a co-op in which they all use the same reusable glass bottles to distribute their beverages that are, collected, centrally washed, and redistributed again. In Oregon, there's a system like that. There's a number of breweries that participate in a bottle refill system. So there, again, we have an example of it. It's happening. It's possible. Communities are doing it. And so I think change happens at all different levels in all different ways. And in my work, I mostly focus on, well, as an attorney, I mostly focus on legislative advocacy and litigation, community lawyering, but I'm very eager to support people doing all different kinds of change making to try to really create a sustainable future. Yeah, Mona.
Yeah, I mean, this is all really great stuff you're talking about. I just wanted to give an example of one place where real redesign thought is actually being implemented in a corporation, and the corporation happens to be Unilever. And one of the tasks that was put out to their beauty products division. Beauty products apparently have excessive, really excessive packaging. You know, we all see how much it is. And one of the criteria by which people's performance for a given year was going to be based on, that was a very significant part of their employee assessment, what ideas they brought to the table. So it's another way that institutions, different kinds of institutions, have to like look within and use the power of the people in those institutions to come up with some of these ideas. So just an example.
Yeah, that's very cool. I did see an article maybe a month ago in the New York Times about a lot of the larger toiletry and cleaning product companies, Unilever being one of them, that were finding ways to sell capsules that they could be added to water and refillable cartridges or capsules for soap and detergent, because a lot of those products is actually water. So there's really no reason to sell them in gigantic plastic containers if you can just reuse the container, add the capsule, fill it with water, shake it, you got your detergent right there. So that was really pleasant to see that a lot of different larger companies are investing in these solutions. So thanks for mentioning it. I didn't know that they were doing it with that particular kind of product, but there's a lot of room for innovation here.
Oh yeah, there is. And I like the idea that they're tying it to, it's creating a culture of, this is what we're doing to be a sustainable industry. And kind of baking that into the whole employee mentality. And it seems to be working. I've spoken to a number of people who work there, and they're very excited. It's like competitive, like how many ideas can people come up with and generate and work on, and it's good to see. So it is happening, but it's a lot more has to happen.
Yeah, Laura.
You mentioned the Mass is Not Disposable Coalition. Is there, is that something that we can get on the email list or join the coalition so we can get more of these action alerts related to these kind of issues?
Yeah, certainly. I did invite Mary Lou to one of the meetings, and it was awesome to have her there. And one of you, if you'd like to attend, you can. We were meeting every other Thursday at 4, leading up to the legislative session. I don't know if we're going to continue to do that. Kirsty Patchy, who is the executive director of Just Zero, facilitates those groups. So just let me know who you'd like to add to her mailing list, and I'll let Kirsty know.
You can add me. I send out our weekly newsletter for our group. So
okay.
Yeah, I'd love to be on the email list.
Great.
Any final questions for Mara before we kind of try to sum it up and release you to your night? I thought this was wonderful. So many great bills in the legislative
I have a
session.
question. Like, other than like the meeting times posted on the Zoom list, are there any other like times where we will be meeting?
For the Mass is Not Disposable Coalition?
Yeah.
Or
Or for
so
climate,
oh, sorry.
or did you mean for climate reality for this group?
Climate reality.
Yeah, so we usually meet the first Monday of every month, but we're taking July off and we're just going to have a leadership team meeting in July. But then this is a great transition. But then in August, we're going to be meeting with Envision Resilience, which is a really cool group that's doing research in New Bedford and Fairhaven about the consequences of climate change. And they've got some really cool projects coming up and lectures, and it's going to be really exciting. Basically they have lots of foundation money to invest in uncovering what the consequences of climate change will be for our region, what options there are for resilience, and really excited about it. But then we also have a book club meeting this Thursday for our climate reality group, we're discussing a minor revolution. And it's in person at the UU Church on the porch, which is covered. So if it rains, we can still meet outside in the fresh air. But I'd love to thank you all for coming tonight, and thank you so much to Mara. So it sounds like moving forward, we're going to get a template to help us write our written testimony about why these bills matter. And Mara is going to share some fact sheets that I will email out to all of you regarding the EPR bill and the plastic bag ban bill, which are the two that are most, that's coming up the 14th. That's what hearing is happening first. And then after that, there'll be the bottle bill and the chemical recycling bill probably at the end of June. But testimony doesn't have to be complicated. It can just be about all the plastic that you see on the streets or the beaches in your community. I'm an educator, and some of my students who've gone to Mary Lou's cleanups and my own children are going to be writing testimony as well. And they'll just be a simple paragraph, but it often means a lot coming from a child about how much it upsets them to see plastic in their community on the street. So, and I am just so grateful, Mara, that you took the time out of your busy evening to come and speak with us. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's really exciting to just meet with you and to see the work you're doing. And I hope to see some of you on at the State House on June 14th.
Excellent. And the final plug is that Mary Lou has a cleanup on Saturday at Fort Phoenix, and it is the World Oceans Day cleanup. It is from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. at Fort Phoenix. Wear closed-toe shoes, bring your reusable water bottle, and from 12 to 1, there will be pizza and homemade Mary Lou cookies, which are the best, along with prizes, and because it's a Pokemon cleanup. So everyone is welcome. You can tell your friends, and it should be fun. So, thank you all for coming tonight. We really are glad you made it out. Have a good night.
You
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Good
Thank
night.
you so
everybody.
much.
Good night.
Thank you.
See y'all.